Yes.
Yep. Does that mean I'm muted now? It's got to turn red.
It's got to be red.
Okay.
Okay. We are live now. I think both your mics are working pretty well. Welcome, everybody. We have another debate today. It is going to be with Ken Hovind and Bill Ludlow. I actually am going to just mute a little bit because I guess we're getting some background noise. But it is 2:30 my time. It is Friday, July 14th. This one's going to be, is there evidence for human evolution? Part of Bill's debate presentation actually includes a little bit about him. So we're going to skip the openers today. We're going to go right into his presentation. He's going to have about 15, 20 minutes or so to do his presentation. And then Kent's going to get equal time to do his or rebut what Bill has. So we're going to just go straight into it. Bill, the floor is yours. I'm going to present to you as soon as you start with your slides, and we're going to go from there.
I'm not a professional scientist, but I am a member of the Geological Society of America, the Southwest Paleontological Society, National Center for Science Education, and I volunteer at the Arizona Museum of Natural History, where I am the human origins specialist in the Origins Gallery down there. I would consider myself a science activist and a science educator. So, go.
Bill just listed off his list of credentials, which are simply organizations that he pays an annual membership fee to. They're not a credential. It's not something he's earned. It's something he's paying for. Like a magazine subscription. It's nothing more. And that's what he keeps listing off. Credentials are something you've earned, not something you buy. Take a close look, Bill. These are credentials. They're also degrees. They did it. They got credentials. They got their degrees. You didn't. So you list off your magazines that you subscribe to as your credentials.
Right into the presentation, we're going to cover 4 million years of human evolution here. We're going to start with Australopithecus, because we definitely want to show pre-human, and I think everybody would agree that Australopiths are pre-human. So starting with everyone's favorite, Lucy, discovered by Donald Johanson in 1974, Australopithecus afarensis. Her species is represented by fossils from over 400 individuals now.
Another stunning claim. 400 individuals to back up Lucy. Now, 400 individuals would look like this, what you're seeing in the picture here. This ain't quite what they really got. When they say 400 individuals, it's like they decided to end the sentence halfway through. It should have said 400 individual pieces.
Okay, here's the 400 individuals plus Lucy. You'll see most of the individuals are actually just individual pieces of bone. Now I'm going to show you the rest of the bone collection here so you see them all. Okay, there's the rest of them. There are your 400 individuals. They're not whole skeletons. They're like 400 pieces. And look at the bones. Look at how small they are. How the heck can they tell if those are from the same species as Lucy or not? And the reason why I have to doubt them is because in the Lucy exhibit, you'll see there's a baboon bone. They got that wrong. It's right in the exhibit, and they got that wrong. It was there for a couple decades. So how are we supposed to trust all them other tiny pieces of bone?
they lived in East Africa 3.8 to 2.9 million years ago. Was Lucy a chimp? No, Lucy wasn't a chimp. She was almost as different, or I should say chimps are almost as different from our common ancestor as we are. They've been evolving just as long as we have.
Interesting statement. However, as you can see here, there's nothing between the chimpanzee and the common ancestor because there's no money to be made on that side.
Additional evidence has come to light which suggests that Lucy is little more than a chimpanzee. Johansson and his co-workers admitted in an article in March 31, 1994 issue of Nature that Lucy possessed chimp-proportioned arm bones. C. Kimball, et al., 1994, and that her alleged descendants, for example, A. africanus and H. habilis, had ape-like limb proportions as well, which is a clear indication that she did not evolve into something more human.
I'd like you to pay attention to the picture that Billy used in his presentation of Lucy, showing her pelvis like that of a human and a complete skull. The lower picture is the actual images of what they found. Okay, they made the complete skull out of those few pieces. And the pelvis, as you can see, does not flare out like that. That particular pelvis look was done by Owen Lovejoy, and I'll show you the footage of him doing that.
Now, Lucy clearly has a hip like this. Take a look. This is Australopithecus afarensis. It doesn't happen to be the Lucy hip, but it's a hip of afarensis.
The ape that stood up, it was a revolutionary idea. We needed Owen Lovejoy's expertise again, because the evidence wasn't quite adding up. The knee looked human, but the shape of her hip didn't. Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human. The knee looked human, but the shape of her hip didn't. Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human. But Lovejoy noticed something odd about the way the bones had been fossilized.
When I put the two parts of the pelvis together that we had, this part of the pelvis has pressed so hard and so completely into this one that it caused it to be broken into a series of individual pieces which were then fused together in later. This has caused the two bones, in fact, to fit together so well that they're in an anatomically impossible position.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bones seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost.
This is a power saw, friends. You may want to put your goggles on.
Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster.
Notice he's removing whole parts, not just cutting.
He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle.
Look how perfect. You can read a newspaper through the hole.
As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
Here we have a great example of what Lucy's pelvis really looked like. In the upper right-hand corner is Lucy's actual pelvis. The middle upper picture is Australopithecus afarensis' second complete pelvis that was found. And you'll notice that it's an exact match for Lucy's pelvis, not the power saw reconstruction pelvis that Owen Lovejoy did. Yet that is what Bill chose to use. When these facts were out there, he's hiding them, and he's trying to make Lucy look like more like a human than she really is. She's basically just a chimpanzee, and science has kicked her to the curb.
When you take Lucy's skeleton and you flip it over and superimpose it onto itself, it shows actually how complete it really is. Primates are asymmetrical, so we have a very complete skeleton there. Lucy was not a knuckle walker. Knuckle walking evolved after our split with our common ancestor. We see differences in the type of knuckle walking between chimps and gorillas. There's no evidence that Lucy was ever a knuckle walking chimp.
Zuckerman's research which established conclusively that the Australopithecines were nothing but knuckle-walking apes, was performed on fossils younger, that is, closer to man, than Lucy.
Looking at their skulls, cranial capacity ranged from 375 to 530 cc's. The variation is due to sexual dimorphism, where males would be larger than females. And we're going to pay attention to the cranial capacity here as we go along. And we're going to pay attention to the cranial capacity here as we go along. No modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers, originating from the same layers as Australopithecus afarensis.
This is going to be explained. Yes, modern human knees have been found 1 million years older in the geological column than Lucy.
If anyone could tell me what sort of creature that knee belonged to, he could.
When Don brought the Hadar knee back from Ethiopia, he brought it over to my house and laid it out on the living room carpet. And I knew instantly that was a human. Don brought the Hadar knee back from Ethiopia. He brought it over to my house and laid it out on the living room carpet. And I knew instantly that was a human knee.
You can see here in this scientific diagram of where the Hadar knee was found versus where Lucy was found. In the geological column, the human knee was found 1 million years below Lucy. Get that right. A human knee found 1 million years in the geological column below Lucy.
No modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers, originating from the same layers as Australopithecus afarensis.
Yes, it is a modern human knee that was found way below Lucy. Bill, you're wrong again.
No modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers, originating from the same layers as Australopithecus afarensis.
Some people are really stupid. Did you ever notice that? How many really stupid people you run into during the day?
For my discovery of Lucy 4 years today, and her knee and her ankle were also preserved. And we know from the detailed anatomy of both of those areas, those anatomical regions, that they were certainly commensurate with fully upright walking.
Yes, evolutionists got their butt hurts when creationists pointed out that Johansen was lying about the knee. This is straight from Nova, and I'll read it to you. Owen Lovejoy, he said this: when Don brought the Hadar knee back from Ethiopia, he brought it over to my house and laid it out on the living room carpet. And I knew instantly that was a human knee. Dr. Johansen said this: what was a modern-looking human knee doing among fossils that were millions of years old? Can anybody say Cambrian rabbit?
So, Australopithecus africanus is next up. Tongchild was the first one, discovered in 1924. We believe that skull was of a 3-year-old. They lived in South Africa 3.3 to 2.1 million years ago. Again, several hundred fossil specimens have been found, and they overlapped with afarensis in East Africa just for a few 100,000 years there. Were they a chimp? No, I mean, completely different now. You look at the difference in the skulls. This and Africanus had longer arms and shorter legs than modern humans, but that's because they were a transitional species. Evidence for bipedalism in Australopithecines: we have placement of the foramen magnum at the base of the skull.
Paleoanthropologist Raymond Dart used the orientation of the hole on the Tongchild skull of Australopithecus africanus to argue that the fossil represented an early human, and, more recently, Michel Burnett has used the same argument to hypothesize an early human identity for a controversial fossil called Sahelanthropus shadensis. But other researchers have cast doubt on whether this curious skull opening really is a clear indicator of striding about on 2 legs. A connection between the foramen magnum and bipedalism seems right, but there's not much hard evidence to back up the link. and as researchers William Kimball and Yoel Rack suggested in a 2010 study, the position of the skull opening may have more to do with the posture of the trunk than walking upright. Past attempts to link foramen magnum position with bipedalism specifically have also been complicated by the fact that H. sapiens is the only habitually bipedal primate species.
We have the attachment of neck muscles to the skull, shape of their spine, angle of their knees. They had no divergent big toe.
Here you can see that was a lie. It most certainly does have a divergent big toe.
Cranial capacity averaged 485 cc's. Compared to Afarensis, we see already a less projecting face, more rounded skull, no cranial crest, and smaller dentition. So they're getting a little bit closer to us. And again, no modern human remains ever been found in the same layers as Afarensis or Africanus. Fixed arches in their foot, side to side and front to back, and the shape of the pelvis, which we can tell whether they were bipedal or not by the shape of their pelvis. Pithecia sediba was a fairly new one, discovered 2008 by 8-year-old Matthew Berger, son of Lee Berger. We're up to 1.98 million years ago, so just under 2 million years. Lots of different features to them. I'm not really going to take the time to cover all that. We're going to keep moving right along. Homo habilis, again, just under 2 million years ago. First discovered by the Leakeys in Kubifora, Kenya. And these are the early tool makers. Now, we might have seen evidence with tool makers prior, but this is the first species that's associated with tool making by design, with something with an end product in mind. Chimps might use a rock or a stick, but the closest we've seen them to designing tools is stripping leaves off of a stick to get at termites. These are the Olawan style tools dating back as far as 2.5 million years, discovered in Olduvai Gorge by Leakeys. Again, an end product in mind, but not a real refined type of tool. Homo rudolfensis, which some people will consider Homo habilis, again at 1.9 million years ago, so just under 2 million years. Look at that cranial capacity. Now we're up to 775 cc's. We're seeing a gradual increase here in brain size. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers as Homo habilis. Homo erectus, these were the most successful humans so far. They were around for about 1.75 million years. First species to leave Africa. So they were around from 1.89 million years to 143,000 years ago. The early cranial capacity we see on average is 850 cc's, and the later up to 1,100 cc's. So we can see the brains getting larger again. African Homo erectus, some people will call Homo ergaster. This is one at 1.75 million years with a cranial capacity of 850 cc's. Again, most successful human species so far. Homo erectus turcanaboy skull at 1.5 million years, cranial capacity 880 cc's, discovered in Lake Turkana. We've got Turcanaboy. We can tell his age. He still had his wisdom teeth, so that's one of the ways we can tell age from some of these bones in the dirt. Pelvis, long legs, 5'3" tall. Asian Homo erectus. This is one of the skulls discovered in Java, but a more recent discovery in 1969, not the early Java man. Cranial capacity there, 1,000 cc's already we're seeing. And just to cover again, if you line these skulls up, Africanus, habilis, erectus, and I do this at the museum when I'm speaking there and talking with children there. It's so obvious that an 8 or 10-year-old can put them back in the right order. I can mix them up and be talking with these kids and ask them to put them back in the right order. I mean, and they'll put them in the right order based on these different transitional features.
Bill, the children aren't looking at the transitional features. They're put in order by size, just like science does.
Again, we're seeing 435 to 530, average 450 cc's on a brain size on the Africanus. Homo habilis averages 680. Homo erectus averages 1,000. We're seeing a transition happen right there. And no modern human brains have ever been found in the same layers as Homo erectus. But what we do find is Acheulean hand axes. Stone tool technology advances with increase in brain size. We see crude hand axes at 1.75 million years, and then as recently as under 1 million years, we start seeing them really get refined. These are found in Asia, Africa, North America. The Native Americans used them. So Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo neanderthalensis, and it's all use the same tool technology. So here's heidelbergensis. These are ancestral to Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis, and they were around from about 700,000 to 200,000 years ago. Again, we're kind of looking at where they fit in the chain of things here. We have lots of remains of these guys. There was 28 individuals dated to 430,000 years old. They used 6 different methods to come up with the date range on those. We've actually pulled DNA out of Homo heidelbergensis. We know that they shared a common ancestor with the Denisovans. We're going to get to them in a minute, but also had Neanderthal-like features. Their skulls from. This is the Cobway skull, and this would be 300,000 years ago. We're getting to now Heidelbergensis. Some would call it Rhodesiensis. So again, African. Sometimes there are people they call splitters that split them into different species, but we still see large brow ridges. But now we're getting a flat face like modern humans. We've got the low brain case profile like Homo erectus, but the brain size is 1,300 cc's. So by 300,000 years ago, we've seen almost modern human average brain size, and no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers. Neanderthals, everybody's favorite caveman here, found in Europe and Western Asia, went extinct by 39,000 years ago. Again, hundreds of fossil specimens found. First discovered in 1829. They didn't know what it was really. The type specimen, Neander 1, is from the Neander Valley. That's where they got their name. But that was discovered in 1856. This is the most complete Neanderthal skull here, discovered in 1909, 70,000 years old. Cranial capacity over 1,600 cc's. So actually, a lot of these early Neanderthals had a brain size larger than modern humans. This is the one that pretty much debunked the earlier theory that that Neanderthals were stooped, brutish creatures. But we don't believe that anymore. That was a lot of political and religious kind of stuff from back in the 1800s that caused that.
You'll note Bill keeps pushing brain size as proof of evolution. Science seems to neglect the fact that humans do not have the largest brain size of the Homo sapien bloodline. We are just above Homo habilis, with Homo erectus and Homo neanderthal above us in brain size. Now, we know DNA-wise that those two are related to us where the other ones are not. And we also know that they bred, because we've got their DNA in our DNA. So they are basically humans. But they're humans with bigger brains and a brawnier skeleton, and entropy has taken over. The second law of thermodynamics is shutting down the genome It's not making it better. And this is proof. And Bill, a bigger brain does not mean smarter. I think you should know that by now.
Comparison with modern humans: conical rib cage, thicker hand bones, wider pelvis, shorter lower legs. There's a lot of differences in the skull. Of course, the shape of the brain case, occipital bone at the back of the skull used for muscle attachments, their noses, the nasal bone projected, and they had no chin.
The Neanderthals' large jaw and protruding midface meant that they had a weak or receding chin. The receding chin is not no chin at all. It's still a chin. A receding chin in a modern human is normally a congenital condition. They also conclude that this elongated skull was a normal anthropological variation, not a result of a disease of any type or congenital abnormalities. But they had chins.
They also had the larger brow ridge. So 550,000 years, after the last mating, we can see measurable impacts on gene expression. If you are living in, if you have a European ancestry, you have up to 5% Neanderthal DNA in you.
Do people and bananas really share 50% of the same DNA? By Alia Hoyt, updated April 1st, 2021. Yep, the one on the right is a fruit, the one on the left is an animal. But we do have some common DNA. At a trivia night or even in a Dude Perfect video, you may have heard the fun little factoid that humans and bananas share 50 or 60% of the same DNA.
And let's see, they use radiocarbon dates on the Neanderthal remains. It's one of the only species, because some of them are below 50,000 years, that were able to do that. And we can tell that Neanderthals did not disappear all at once. So they didn't die out one time. They died off at different times, different parts of the world. Denisovans, now this is a fairly new species discovered. The only thing we have is two. Actually, I think they just discovered a third tooth. So we have a couple teeth and a pinky bone. We know that we have the genome, though, so we know that up to 5% of Southeast Asians have they have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. And we can tell how they split by using genetic markers. By sequencing ancient and modern DNA, comparing differences, and calculating how much time was needed for the variations to accumulate, scientists can create timelines for when different populations split. Current model shows genetic splits that would have occurred several generations after the human populations became separated geographically. Over here, we can see back, we're right around just before Homo heidelbergensis, with Homo erectus here. Heidelbergensis is right in here. We can see where the Denisovans and the Neanderthals split and where modern humans are. And we can tell this because we have the Denisovan genome, the Neanderthal genome, the modern human genome, and the Homo heidelbergensis genome.
Matthias Meyer has just published the results of what may be the world's most wasteful genome sequencing project. In decoding just 0.1% of the genome of the oldest DNA ever recovered from an ancient human, the molecular biologist at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, threw out enough raw data to map the modern human genome dozens of times over. But the excess was necessary, because the DNA in the 430,000-year-old bones was degraded and contaminated. Meyer's feat of recovery has revealed that the remains, from a cavern in northern Spain, represent early Neanderthals, and has pushed back estimates of the time at which the ancient predecessors of humans must have split from those of Neanderthals. Starting such a thing is already very ambitious, and managing it is even more impressive, says Ludovic Orlando, an ancient DNA researcher at the Natural History Museum of Denmark in Copenhagen. We are really reaching the limits of what is possible.
Completed genomes. You said we have no DNA. We have the completed genomes of Neanderthals at around 40 to 60,000 years. I think we have them again about 80,000 years.
They don't claim to be an ancestor.
Hold on. And also we have the 430,000-year-old Homo heidelbergensis Neanderthalensis split, which we have the complete genome. We have the DNA for all those. Absolutely, we do too.
No, you don't produce it.
The Cimo de los Huesos, yeah, we have the completed genome for them. I can bring that up for you if you're disputing it.
After developing new technology, a team from Germany's Max Planck Institute salvaged 0.1% of the Cimo genome from one femur bone and a tooth.
0.1% is a very long way from a complete genome. Bill? DNA has a half-life of 521 years, so at 11 half-lives you would have 0.048% of the genome. Now assume that the DNA was equally split between the leg and tooth. This would be the most generous way and it would give the most half-lives. Now adding the two would give you about 0.1% genome. So 11 half-lives is accurate, giving the date of the fossil as 5,731 years. That is in no way ever going to be able to be labeled as 430,000 years old. Can you say fraud?
Homo naledi is a real recent one, discovered in 2013, described by Lieberger in 2015. When they were first discovered, we didn't know how old they were. Again, dated by 6 different methods now.
According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, they only used 2 methods to date the remains. The first method proved to be the wrong method to use. The samples were far too young for it, with its minimum age of 1 million years, and it turns out that the age was 236,000 years. So that dating method actually doesn't count as being used as a dating method because it didn't count. So there was only one dating method that actually was able to be used, and that was the U-series electron spin resonance dating. Not 6 different dating methods. Sorry, Bill. You exaggerate or lie again.
They've got them down to a range between 235 and 335,000 years ago. They were found in the Rising Star Cave in South Africa near Johannesburg. And over 1,500 fossil specimens from 15 individuals were brought up. And Lieberger says we're going to kind of breeze through this, but from the waist up, they were almost like an Australopith. Long arms, curved fingers, small shoulders, small head. But from the waist down, they were just like modern humans. And I'm holding a fossil in my hand. Creationists can't figure this out. I'd like to know what Kent thinks about them. We've got the Core Academy of Science over here saying they're fully human. We've got Answers in Genesis saying they're fully ape. They can't figure this out. Institute for Creation Research, they gave up. They said they're imaginary creatures. I mean, scientists have been duped, so they wouldn't even.
Under closer examination, however, all fossils can be identified as human, ape, or make-believe. For example, let us examine one of the most famous alleged ape ancestors of humans, Lucy. A few years ago, millions of dollars were spent on science exhibits inviting the public to meet Lucy, your ancestor. Yet Lucy's bones had been found very near to fully human footprints in Litola, Africa. Evolutionary scientists alleged that Lucy must have made the human footprints because the date of the rock where the footprints were found was too early to be fully human. Consequently, Exhibits in science museums showed Lucy with human feet, even though her foot bones had not been found. Eventually, after more careful study, even the evolution-believing scientists were forced to conclude that Lucy was a knuckle-dragging Australopithecine ape and that she could not possibly have made the Litola footprints. In short, Lucy's expensive exhibits combined 1. Human fossil footprints, 2. Ape bones, and 3. A make-believe ape woman with human feet.
Access paleontology is what Lee Berger's all about. You can download 3D printable files. They're available for everyone. No more of this hiding fossils and locking them away in safes. Modern paleontology is very open, and we won't see things that happened before happen again as far as not having access to these fossils. Again, over 1,500 specimens, but wait, there's more. The Lissetti chamber. Lee Berger announced more individuals, but wait, there's more. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers. This is the little hobbit guy, Homo floresiensis. They nicknamed him the Hobbit because their adults were only 3.5 feet tall, and they had big feet. So we do find them using crude stone tools, though, and fire pits. We find the bones, charred bones with the cut marks on them where they were. We also know now that it looks like they evolved from Homo habilis. They are not a dwarf species of Homo erectus. Now, looking 200 to 300,000 years ago, we had all these different human species alive on different parts of the planet. Example of this happening today would be with baboons. Genetic and fossil evidence shows modern baboons originated in South Africa. As groups became isolated, they diverged into 5 different species. These species may produce offspring in hybrid zones, but some remain genetically isolated. So it takes millions of years for large mammal species to become completely reproductively isolated. Olive baboons in the middle here, they started off as a hybrid. Then they became a very successful species, probably the most. But we see differences in physical traits.
Abstract. Though belonging to genera that have been distinct for several million years, Gelada and common baboons, Theropithecus gelada and Papio hamadryas sensulato, respectively, interbreed occasionally, even in the wild.
We see difference in cultural traits between all these different species of baboons, and I believe it's the same type of thing. I'm not saying we came from baboons. I'm saying I'm comparing what we see currently with baboons with what happened 200 to 300,000 years ago with humans. Genetic evidence, we've completed genomes for all these. Accumulation of neutral mutations occurs with enough regularity to provide a molecular clock. It gives us an estimate of how long ago each species diverged, and it aligns with our known fossil record. And the DNA studies also align with the known fossil record. Archaeology, if we want to talk about bones in the dirt, what can we learn from the study of osteoarchaeology? A lot of times we would know where the person lived, where we found them. We would know when they lived because we can date the fossils. How old they were when they died, a lot of times we can tell that. Sometimes we can tell how they died. We know of, for example, of a murder that occurred in Spain 430,000 years ago. Sometimes we can tell whether they died of disease, whether they were killed, male or female, and we can see primitive versus derived traits, being early traits that we see in species that came before, and then the derived traits would be something that shows up then and continues on after that. Forensic facial reconstruction, because I know there's going to be people saying, oh gosh, look at, he used all those pictures, they made those up. Well, we can tell what a species looked like. No one really knows what an individual looked like, but forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing. It's been used to solve crimes. It's makes for a great visual presentation too. So
loser, beaten by the queen of hearts every time.
Slide with Neanderthals that showed that they have no chin. Some guy gets a hold of it and decides to show wrong, so he makes a video with artist rendering of Neanderthals. Artist renderings. He's not showing actual skulls. He's showing artist renderings with receding chins. In fact, the last one that he shows coming up here actually had a very receding chin, but because of the color of the The slide here, you can't tell that it was covered with hair.
Bill says you can't tell that this is a receding chin because it's covered with hair. I can tell. Can you?
No one really knows what an individual looked like, but forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing. It's been used to solve crimes. It's makes for a great visual presentation too.
How can you solve crimes if you can't tell what an individual looks like? Certainly an entire species doesn't commit the crime. You're not making any sense.
There's going to be people saying, oh gosh, look at, he used all those pictures, they made those up. Well, we can tell what a species looked like. No one really knows what an individual looked like. But forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing, used to solve crimes. But forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing. It's been used to solve crimes. With artist rendering of Neanderthals. Artist renderings. He's not showing actual skulls. He's showing artist renderings with receding chins. But forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing. It's been used to solve crimes. People saying, oh gosh, look at, he used all those pictures, they made those up. Well, we can tell what a species looked like. No one really knows what an individual looked like, but forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing, used to solve crimes. With artist rendering of Neanderthals. Artist renderings. He's not showing actual skulls. He's showing artist renderings with receding chins. But forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing. It's been used to solve crime.
Bill Ludlow clearly claims, and Bill defended his claim, that Neanderthals have no chin. Having no chin is not the same as having a receding chin or small chin. If a chin is not a protruding chin, that does not mean it doesn't exist. It simply means it's in a different shape, but it is still there. I am showing you these slides of articles that are talking about Neanderthal chins. They described the Neanderthal chin as weak, or slanted, or receding. It is very obvious they are describing the shape of the Neanderthal chin. As in, the Neanderthals had chins. Now for the people like Bill. Listen up, Bill. In other words, they are not describing something that doesn't exist. Rather, they are describing something that is there. The fact is, Neanderthals had chins.
Example, in Kubifora, Kenya, over 200 layers of volcanic tuff were dated and chemically analyzed. So we have 200 layers throughout that geological column that they've made just for that area. 200 layers have been dated and tested. Lucy shows up in the middle of the column there, showing up at about 3.18 million years old. All these different layers, we have different thin layers of volcanic ash that can be dated. And this shows where the first family dates a little bit older. The first knee joint that Johansen discovered in 1973 is actually quite a bit older than Lucy was. Testing our theory. How would we test the theory of evolution? And as far as human evolution, we would, to test the hypothesis about the change of kind from early species to modern humans, we would predict that we would find evidence in the fossil record for such a transitional change. We would predict the recent layers would contain modern humans. At some point, anatomically, modern humans would cease to exist in the fossil record, and we would only see evidence of species with both those primitive and derived traits, becoming more primitive as the fossils get older, ending up with only these early apes in the oldest layers. That's exactly what we see. We never see human remains in with any of these primitive species or older fossil remains. Never see it.
You can say we never find any human remains below any of your monkeys, but that doesn't make it fact. The fact is, a modern human knee was found in your geological column at around the 4 million year old mark, which puts it way below all of the monkeys you just talked about. And to date, up till today, there is still no locking knee that resembles a human found with any monkeys. It doesn't exist. Billy, here's your Cambrian rabbit. Your whole spiel was just blown away by the fact that there's a modern human knee in your geological column way below everything you just provided as evidence for evolution.
Over 6,000 individuals now we have cataloged in hominin evolution. We're just talking about humans here. If you look at the fossil record as a whole, most creationists will agree to microevolution. Oh yeah, microevolution happens. They have to. I mean, because we see these changes.
This study was designed to compare epigenetic changes among several closely related species of Darwin's finches, a well-known example of adaptive radiation. Erythrocyte DNA was obtained from 5 species of sympatric Darwin's finches that vary in phylogenetic relatedness. Genome-wide alterations and genetic mutations using copy number variation (CNV) were compared with epigenetic alterations associated with differential DNA methylation regions (epimutations). Epimutations were more common than genetic CNV mutations among the 5 species. Furthermore, the number of epimutations increased monotonically with phylogenetic distance. Interestingly, the number of genetic CNV mutations did not consistently increase with phylogenetic distance. The number, chromosomal locations, regional clustering, and lack of overlap of epimutations and genetic mutations suggest that epigenetic changes are distinct and that they correlate with the history of Darwin's finches. The potential functional significance of the epimutations was explored by comparing their locations on the genome to the location of important genes and cellular pathways in birds. Specific epimutations were associated with genes related to the bone morphogenic protein, toll receptor, and melanogenesis signaling pathways. Species-specific epimutations were significantly overrepresented in these pathways. As environmental factors are known to result in heritable changes in the epigenome, epigenetic caused the changes to the molecular basis of the Darwin's finches. Epigenetics can be the only explanation for the changes in Darwin's finches. The finches' beaks all returned to normal when the environment changed back to normal. We all know mutations can't do that.
But if you lined up all these skulls and put them in a row, you're seeing microevolution from one to the other. And if you look at it over as a whole, it becomes macro. I mean, you can line up Australopithecus on the left, modern human on the right, and every little minor change is a macro change. But you go back and look at the first skull and the last skull, and everybody's going to say, oh yeah, that's a different species. That's macroevolution. We just witnessed a change in kind by studying the fossil record. Australopithecus afarensis female on the left, Homo sapiens female on the right. I don't think anybody's going to disagree that we have 2 different species there. To argue against this, let me join you, because this march of progress type thing for human evolution is not what we see in the fossil record. It was something that was dreamed up 150 years ago, but we have much more like a bush. It's not a straight ladder-like progression. So again, the difference between us and the other apes is great, but we didn't evolve from them. If you could line up all the hominin ancestors, you could see the transition. If we could stand all our ancestors in front of us today, you could see the transition. So millions of years of human evolution, the evidence cannot be denied. Charles Darwin would be pleased to see the transitional species in the fossil record today, just as predicted. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. That was a great presentation. I'm going to give Kent exactly the same amount of time, which is about 20 to 22 minutes or so. Kent, you can use it to do your own presentation or start into rebuttal on Bill's, whatever you feel you want to do. Okay?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for letting me be on here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You sound great.
Okay. Sounds good. Yes. Well, I appreciate everything he said. I think since the title of this is there evidence for human evolution? I think the word evidence has very clear meaning. In a court of law, absolutely nothing that he shared with us would hold up. he gave a list of things we can tell from these fossils, you know, how they died, maybe how old they were when they died. And I think I would agree with all of that. But he did not have on that list, nor could he put on that list, that you could prove that those specimens that you found had any children at all. Certainly you couldn't prove they had children that lived. And if you're going to claim that these are transitional between something, you have to find not only that they had children or prove they had children, and they also had to find a mate who had the similar characteristics that went on. So lining up a bunch of bones you found in the dirt, everything in his presentation would be thrown out in the first 10 seconds in an honest court of law, because what he found are bones in the dirt. He is putting an interpretation on them that says, oh, they were able to do something back then that no animal today can do. The Bible teaches clearly that before the flood came, the people lived to be 900 years old. There are all sorts of legends of what is called the Golden Age. They're found all over the world, where different cultures, even people with no contact with Christianized or Hebrew Jewish cultures, would teach, oh yeah, there was a golden age when man used to live to be nearly 1,000. And they lived peacefully and died in their sleep kind of stuff. Just Google Golden Age, you'll find a lot of information on that. So the Bible clearly teaches the people lived to be 900. Now, it's also a biological fact that the bones of your head are continually changing and growing and adapting. People that live in a place where they have a coarser diet, like the Aborigines in Australia, have larger eyebrow ridges because of the chewing muscles that attach to the eyebrow ridge from the masseter and the temporalis muscles. It's just simply a matter of either coarser diet or older age. Now, the Bible says clearly in Genesis chapter 1 that God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So God created man in his own image. All of this effort that Bill puts out and others put out to try to make man a descendant of a monkey, he needs to understand, and I'm sure he does, this is a clear violation of what the Bible teaches, and he's welcome to do that. But I think that's a dangerous position to be in Judgment Day. The evolution theory teaches we are improving and getting better, and someday we get to become like God, which is the same lie Satan told Eve in the Garden of Eden. The reality is, I think humans are getting worse, degrading from what they used to be. Fossils, he didn't mention any of the gigantic fossils that have been found of people 8, 9, 10 feet tall, and there are hundreds of those. So as far as can an ape-like creature turn to a human, well, there's no evidence that any animal today produces something other than its same kind. None of the fossils, as I mentioned, would count. All through the Bible, we have people who live in caves. There are people today who live in caves. It depends what you mean by caveman. So let me just talk about a couple of them. The Nebraska man, which was used for years as evidence for evolution, all came from one tooth. From one tooth, they made Nebraska man, and the entire man and his wife were shown in Illustrated London News back in 1922. Scientifically built up from one tooth. Later, they found out the tooth actually came from a pig, the real Nebraska man. I've got a cover on my video number 2 of my series, which you can watch on drdino.com or on all over the internet, about all of the so-called cavemen. They're touted as evidence and really make the news for a while, and then later are discredited or proven wrong. The New York Times ran an article back in 1912, Darwin theory proved true, based on this skulls that they found. It was used in the 1925 Scopes monkey trial. The Dawn man and the Rhodesia man, he went through the same type of evidence back in 1922 to try to prove evolution was true. All of it was later discredited. The Piltdown man was in the textbooks for 40 years. 1956, Reader's Digest ran an article saying, oh, this was proven to be false. It's not true. The Neanderthals, I think most folks who study them would say, yeah, they're probably normal humans, either living to great age or deformed from diseases like arthritis or vitamin deficiency disease. The 13% bigger brain on the Neanderthals is interesting. And I think they're just simply pre-flood human, or people who shortly after the flood when they're still living to be 400. So I think the Christians or the biblical view would have a very reasonable answer to this. But again, I would go back to say every single bone you find in the dirt, you could not use it as evidence that it's an ancestor to anybody. None of that would count. In an honest court of law, the judge would say, you're right, no bones found in the dirt count. You did not demonstrate that you could prove that they had any children at all. Especially you did not prove they had children that were different than themselves. So all of that is a bunch of baloney. Now, even if it's true, you couldn't prove it to be true. Now, I don't think it is true, but certainly in a court of law, it wouldn't hold up. And the title of the debate is, there evidence for human evolution? Absolutely not. And they have to go back and define what you mean by evolution. What Bill is arguing here is a very, very tiny step trying to get from apes to humans. Really, the evolution theory has to take you from a rock to a human, and ultimately has to take you from absolutely nothing to a rock. That's why I'm very careful in my debates and discussions to define the word evolution. There are 6 different levels or meanings or stages you would have to go through, and everything he gave to so far was down between what I call number 5 and 6. Number 1 would be cosmic evolution, the origin of time, space, matter. They don't like to discuss that, but it is a fact. Before you can have any monkeys or ape-like creatures evolving into humans, you have to have the monkeys or ape-like creatures. Now, where did they come from? They had to come from something earlier, and ultimately, I can show you straight from the textbooks, they do teach they came from a one-celled creature, which came from prebiotic soup. I'm getting a heavy breathing in the background from somebody there. I don't know. Ultimately, they have to say they came from the prebiotic soup. And when you ask them, where did this soup come from? The textbooks teach, well, 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down and it had a hard rocky crust, and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup. And the soup got concentrated in little pools via evaporation, concentrated enough that it came alive. So this entire debate on is there evidence for human evolution is a real tiny, almost insignificant part of a much bigger picture. He hasn't demonstrated any scientific evidence for where the material came from, where space came from, where time came from. So I don't think he's demonstrated that humans have evolved to apes. Apes have evolved, ape-like creatures have evolved to humans. Again, I point out, none of the bones that he found could be proven to have had any children at all. So if he wants to believe that, that's perfectly fine. Now, they are doing a great job of reconstructing these creatures, and they're spending a lot of time trying to put, skin and flesh and hair on them. It's interesting to make them all with dark skin. I think that ought to be offensive to somebody. But I think if you go through one by one and look at these so-called cavemen that he's referring to, you could discredit them. The Aboriginal skulls today look very similar to some of the skulls there because of their coarse diet, and the eyebrow ridge grows larger. That's one bone in your body that never stops growing. It just simply indicates the individual is probably over 200 or 300 years old. So I would ask people to watch my videotape number 2, where I cover all of the cavemen. You can't see all the slides here. I know, I'm sorry about that, but I have done all that. But I guess I'm busy looking at the bigger picture of, and I think, I doubt this will be answered, but how could you prove any of those thousands and thousands of bones you found in the dirt, even if you are reconstructing them correctly? And I won't argue that. Even if they look like they're intermediate between 2 different kinds of animals. Even if you find one that does look like it's half chimpanzee or half ape or half human. How could you prove they had any children that lived and that produced children again? So you have really 3 stages here. Could you prove they had children? No. Could you prove they had children that lived? No. Could you prove they had children that were able to produce something other than their kind? No. It's absolutely silly on its face. In an honest court of law, this was the entire presentation, the whole section of his museum would be thrown out. Now, especially when you go back and look at the history of this teaching from the 1860s up until now, so many of these have been used as evidence for a while, and then later found out, oops, that wasn't correct. We made a mistake. I don't know what Lucy was. What he might have proved is that there were lots of other types of apes or monkeys or different types of creatures that have gone extinct over the centuries. He might have clearly demonstrated extinction, but he did not demonstrate evolution at all. Now, the bigger picture here, he's giving all these dates of 1.9 million years ago, etc., and a gradual increase in brain size. Again, it could be he's demonstrating creatures have gone extinct, but it does not demonstrate they're any relation to modern humans. And the one thing I don't think people are considering in all of this is, what is the result? He's teaching thousands of children that they are nothing but an animal, And I've asked evolutionists this question all over. Maybe Bill can answer it today. If your theory is true, how do you tell right from wrong on any topic? Is abortion right or wrong? Is premarital sex right or wrong? Is sex with your dog right or wrong? Is murder right or wrong? How, with your philosophical background of thinking we are nothing but an advanced ape-like creature, how do you tell right from wrong on any topic? Is it decided by majority opinion? We all get together and vote on it. Well, then in Nazi Germany, they decided, hey, it's okay to kill people that are not blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans. So they didn't do anything wrong. That was their vote. That was their decision. So is it based on, might makes right? Who's got the biggest muscles or the biggest gun? They get to decide. Is there an absolute moral standard anywhere in the universe, and where did it come from? In his worldview, I think we're just an animal. We're nothing but animated meat. And he has to answer the question, where did the original material come from, the space come from, the time come from? And why don't we see any animals today doing this? Apes, chimpanzees, orangutans, monkeys, humans are all having babies all over the world. Why don't we observe it today? Why is it only bones in the dirt that we're able to do this? I'd like to see it happen today. Okay, I'd like to hear his response. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kent. Go ahead. And you, by the way, you do have about 5 more minutes if you want to say anything else, Kent, for equal time, or you just want to turn over your balance to Bill.
Oh, I've got plenty to say. My seminar is 18 hours long. I cover all
okay. No problem. Hey, Bill, you're going to have to unmute because I did have to mute you. There was a little bit of background noise, but it was actually, I think, Kent, you had some background. But while he's unmuting, I do want to thank, we have about 250 viewers right now. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out to listen to this. So, yeah, now, Bill.
Okay. Yeah. Are we there? All right.
Yeah,
I'm going to screen share again. Okay. All right. I'm going to answer the question first. Do we need to know if an individual fossil ever reproduced? Absolutely not. It's just crazy to think that we would look at an individual fossil and have to know whether it reproduced, because every single fossil, or every individual, I should say, is a member of a population. There's no individuals out there living by themselves. And the theory of evolution says that populations evolve over time. It doesn't say individuals give birth to anything else besides themselves. Kent has got a straw man argument there, definitely. He'll say, oh, we have to prove that this individual gave birth to something other than itself. That is not how the theory of evolution works. It's not what it says at all. Again, every individual is a member of a population. The traits that we see in the individual will be present throughout the population. Okay? Again, the straw man, dogs will always give birth to dogs. Animals always produce the same kind. Of course they do. Darwin predicted every species would give birth to the same species, but populations change over time. Okay? Claims about fossils, that they only indicate something died. Bones can't talk. Again, populations evolve, not individuals. We don't have to prove any specific individual had offspring, because every individual is part of a population. Okay. Would it hold up in a court of law? Absolutely it would. We've got an instance here where, remains were found below to the skull. DNA evidence was used. You combine the DNA evidence with the fossil evidence and the killer was convicted. So bones and genetic evidence combined do not lie. Do we look like Neanderthals as we age? Ken has made the statement many times in his videos that eyebrow ridges continue to grow as we get older. That is false.
What is a bit spooky is that upper body strength can even be read on a person's face. What it is in the face that indicates upper body strength, said Sell. He suggests that the correlation may lie in the heavier brow ridge and thicker jaw that result from increased levels of testosterone. Many studies have been done on the effects of testosterone on the face. There's a good chance testosterone is involved in regulating the body for battle, and men with high testosterone.
As years pass, facial bones actually lose volume. Now, what might happen is the eye sockets get larger, and it maybe gives a little bit of appearance of a brow ridge, but the brow ridge itself does not. So if you were to look at the skull, you wouldn't see a large brow ridge like we see with Neanderthals. And chins become more pronounced. Chins don't have or Neanderthals don't have chins. So it's absolutely not a human that lived to be hundreds of years old. So again, brow ridge prominence due to the diminution in fat and with thinning of underlying tissues, eyes flatten and make brow ridges appear prominent. But if you, over to the right, compare it to the skull, you wouldn't see the difference. You wouldn't see it in the skull. You would see it as an outward appearance. You know what does grow is ears grow. Okay, ears grow, and your nose will continue to grow from gravity, but ears keep growing. Is this what Noah looked like at 900 years old? Because I'm telling you, he wouldn't look like a Neanderthal. He would have looked like that if he was 900 years old. Neanderthal art, they invented the hashtag. You know, I'm not saying they were stupid. They weren't stupid. They were different than us, but they weren't doing cave paintings like we were, you know, right around the same time. So Neanderthals are the Y chromosome was never passed down. We have their completed genome. We have our completed genome. We can check this. We never see the male Y chromosome from Neanderthals passed down.
The new finding may solve the decade-old mystery of why researchers have been unable to find a Neanderthal Y chromosome. Part of the problem was the dearth of DNA from men. Of the dozen Neanderthals whose DNA has been sequenced so far, most is from women.
And again, comparing, these are scientific papers, sequence comparison with human DNA sequences, as well as other analysis shows that Neanderthal sequence falls outside the variation of modern humans. They were not modern humans. There's no way. You cannot make that claim. If you do, you're wrong.
In Eurasia, interbreeding between Neanderthals and Denisovans with modern humans took place several times. The introgression events into modern humans are estimated to have happened about 47,000 to 65,000 years ago with Neanderthals and about 44,000 to 54,000 years ago with Denisovans. 1. Biology: a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding. The species is the principal natural taxonomic unit, ranking below a genus and denoted by a Latin binomial.
So it's funny here because this Jack Quazzo will make claims that Neanderthals were healthier than us, smarter than us, and everything else. And then other people are saying they lived to be 900 years old, but they contradict themselves. So I've got more stuff here on the origin. Well, again, we don't have to go to origin life. Other than I would like to point out, again, that's another straw man that Kent is bringing up, saying that we came from a rock. Do we believe we came from a rock? No, we don't believe we came from a rock. Again,
Rocky Start right now on Nova. They're dazzling, priceless, at times even glowing.
How can one not fall in love with rocks and minerals? I mean, the colors, the shapes.
And they're the building blocks of modern civilization.
We wouldn't have televisions, we wouldn't have automobiles, we wouldn't have buildings without the mineral riches that we have.
But could rocks and minerals also solve the greatest mystery of all time, the origin of life?
The rocks we pick up tell a story that life couldn't have occurred without rocks.
Could cold, lifeless stone hold the key to every living thing on Earth? From Australia to Morocco, Nova goes around the world and back in time to investigate the origin and evolution of life.
Look at a rock and you think, ah, well, nothing. But this holds the signature of life.
From its first spark,
people were saying they made Frankenstein in a test tube,
to the survival of the fittest.
These were immense creatures, sharks that may have been 50 or 60 feet.
Was it the secret link between rocks and life that made the difference? Life's Rocky Start, right now on Nova.
The study of how life began is called abiogenesis, okay? Evolution began when the first single-celled life replicated. Change in frequency of alleles in a population over time. There are many hypotheses on how life began, but not a single one can be reduced to we came from a rock.
At a Christmas party 10 years ago, an idea was brewing in Robert Hazen's mind. Hazen was a self-proclaimed, hardcore mineral physicist at the time, and like most scientists and players of 20 questions, he considered mineral to be a totally separate beast from animal and vegetable. But that was soon to change. During the party, theoretical biologist Harold Morowitz asked Hazen whether clay minerals existed during the Hovind, the geologic period between 4.6 and 4 billion years ago, when early Earth was forming. Though a basic question, Hazen was taken aback. Morowitz was essentially asking whether the mineralogy that existed when Earth was new, and possibly when life originated, was different from what we see today. No mineralogist in history had ever asked a question like that, says Hazen. While a mineral forming process should be the same whether it occurred billions of years ago or last Tuesday, Hazen realized there was no reason to assume that minerals couldn't evolve, just as life changes over time. He and his colleagues have since shown that life didn't spring up in isolation, minerals likely helped it along the way. And as life evolved, it created a myriad of chemical niches that allowed new minerals to form. We see this intertwined coevolution of the geosphere and biosphere, says Hazen. Life begets rock, rocks beget life.
Here's one here. They talk about the conditions of life. Here's the Miller-Urey experiment here. It talks about lightning strikes, molecules, organic molecules. The meteorite hypothesis about amino acids that have been found in meteorites. The ocean iron sulfide hypothesis about deep sea vents.
Water is called the universal solvent because it is capable of dissolving more substances than any other liquid. This is important to every living thing on Earth. It means that wherever water goes, either through the air, the ground, or through our bodies, it takes along valuable chemicals, minerals, and nutrients. It is water's chemical composition and physical attributes that make it such an excellent solvent. Water molecules have a polar arrangement of oxygen and hydrogen atoms. One side, hydrogen, has a positive electrical charge and the other side, oxygen, had a negative charge. This allows the water molecule to become attracted to many other different types of molecules. Water can become so heavily attracted to a different compound, like salt, NaCl, that it can disrupt the attractive forces that hold the sodium and chloride in the salt compound together and, thus, dissolve it.
Liquid membrane hypothesis about lipids, how they form in spheres and how they could enclose molecules. RNA, the early RNA world, origin of life. Here we go. Not a single one teaches we came from a rock. It's just another straw man. So,
hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus. These elements account for more than 96% of the stuff life on Earth is made from, and all 6 have been found in a rock sample on Mars.
Kent?
Well, as far as teaching, we came from a rock. I show in my seminar dozens of textbooks, and I have a huge textbook selection from 1880s on up to today. And they certainly do teach that there was primordial soup that came from getting rained on the rocks, and you can watch my seminar part 1. That is exactly what the book teaches, that life had to come from soup, which came from the dissolving of the rocks. It's interesting, the options that he gave, life coming from outer space, that only postpones the problem. He does have to answer the question, where did life get started? I notice it's interesting, since I started doing my 6 meanings of evolution, the evolutionists have gone nuts trying to say, oh, that's not part of evolution. Well, it has to. You have to have something to evolve. So they never answer the first 4. They give their various hypotheses, which is my whole point. They're welcome to believe whatever they want. But this is a religion. This is not a science. Science deals with things we can observe, study, test, demonstrate, replicate in the laboratory. You can't replicate any of the fossils that he gave in the laboratory and show the Neanderthals had children. His illustration he gave, let's see, the killer was found guilty because of the DNA evidence in a court of law. The killer was found because the skull was crushed, etc. That's the death of an individual. That is so different than trying to prove this child had these bones had children. So that was
we don't need to prove they had
that was a real straw man argument. I mean, you're setting up a straw man and demolishing it and thinking you won the victory, but you didn't prove any of the Neanderthal skeletons you found had children. You showed that in a court of law, a killer could be found with various DNA evidence. Okay. And if you found that there's DNA similarity between apes, humans, orangutans, chimps, etc., if we could demonstrate there's a certain percentage of similarity between all these, okay, what would that prove? Would that prove a common ancestor, or could it prove a common designer? This DNA is so complex, much more complicated than any computer code ever written by man. And yet people just want to dismiss it and say, oh, well, hey, look how similar we are. That proves common ancestor, when actually, I think it's better proof for a common designer, common creator. I think I can demonstrate, if we had it listed out in front of us, all that the code required for Microsoft PowerPoint has millions of, maybe certainly hundreds of thousands of identical lines for Microsoft Office and Microsoft Word. Okay, does that prove they're all evolving from Morse code by chance, or could it be there's a common designer using this code? So even if he, okay, even if he showed that there is a certain percentage of DNA similarity, that doesn't answer the question. It doesn't prove the point at all that there's a common ancestor. He may wish to interpret it that way because he wants to, act like an ape or have no morals or something. I don't know what his motive is here, but I know that that in a court of law, I could simply argue, Your Honor, the similarities he's showing here are evidence of a common designer, common creator. In an honest court of law, that would have to be accepted as, yeah, you're right. So he did not demonstrate that this similarity proves any ancestral relationship.
What do you, what is your explanation for why we don't find a single modern human fossil in the same layers as any of these ancestral species?
Well,
Bill, your lack of knowledge does not make it fact. We have found human remains in the geological column at the 4 million year mark. And the experts who examined it have labeled it a modern human knee. And they question, what is it doing there?
First of all, I'd like to know who's looking and who's cataloging this and keeping records. You may be correct. I don't know. To my knowledge, no human bones and chicken bones have ever been found in the same rock layer. So that proves humans and chickens did not live at the same time.
You're wrong on that. I mean, we do find, especially in Africa, the remains of a lot of the animals that they've eaten. As far as, I wouldn't know about specifically chickens, but we find the animals that they were eating in the same layers. So we find a lot of different animal bones.
Sure. Could we demonstrate?
I'm sure
there are thousands of bones. There are thousands of animals alive today that are never found with human bones. So what does that prove? Well, they don't live together. Humans and chickens don't hang out together. And so in a worldwide flood in the days of Noah, they would tend to not be buried together. So not finding the bones together is not evidence of anything. This is arguments from the negative. It wouldn't hold up at all, again, in an honest court of law. Well, we didn't find the gun, so therefore this guy didn't do it. To say that we don't, first of all, I don't know that it's true what you're saying, that human bones are not found in these layers. Secondly,
it's true.
Okay. Just because you said it, that makes it true. Bill said it.
No, because the data shows it. I mean, the data shows it. Go out and find some if you don't believe it. You can come back tomorrow and let me know if you've done your research, if you've ever found modern human fossil remains in the same layers as any of these more primitive species. We never have. And you have no explanation for that. None.
I do indeed. I said, who's looking? Who's cataloging this? Is there a motive to hide evidence if it was found? I think
so. A vast conspiracy is your answer?
That's not my answer. That is a possibility. Now, I pointed out, you go do your research and show me where fossils, not living animals, not living people, where fossil humans and fossil chickens have been found together. I'd like to see the evidence of that.
Chickens are pretty recent. I mean, compared to what the fossils we've been talking today. So they evolved from the jungle fowl.
So if no fossil chickens and fossil humans are ever found and fossilized together, would that prove to you that humans and chickens did not live at the same time?
At that same time, yes. But not now, today. I mean,
chickens are alive today.
Yeah, but we're not fossils. They aren't fossils, and neither are you. So you're comparing two different things. You're saying because we're alive today, we could have existed together 3 million years ago. No, I mean you've got two different things here. So
yes, you are arguing out of both sides of your mouth. You're saying we don't find human fossils with these Lucy fossils, therefore they didn't live together. I'm trying to point out the stupidity of that. Chickens and humans are alive today. I can prove they lived with humans. I ate one yesterday. Yes, humans and chickens live together. Whether we find the bones together or not doesn't matter.
yes, it does. It really does. I mean, again, you're comparing living things with something in the fossil record. It's two completely different things. So anyway, what is you have no explanation for that, basically.
Well, I do.
So,
there is no such thing as a fossil record. You are putting an interpretation on these fossils. There are billions or probably trillions of fossils in the ground. What does that prove? Well, I think it proves a rapid burial of the whole planet in Noah's flood, because fossils don't form. Show me fossils forming today in any great number compared to like the Karoo Formation, where there are 800 million vertebrate animals found.
well, where's this flood boundary? If you say there was a flood, where does it end in the fossil record?
I think nearly all of the layers of strata were formed at the same time. There is no fossil record.
All layers?
I said nearly all of those layers formed today in localized floods. Mount St. Helens deposited a thick layer of ash over my sister's yard.
That's not the same at all. That's volcanic. Well, where is the last sedimentary layer that was laid down by this flood you believe in? It should be really obvious, right? I mean,
no, I don't know.
You have no idea. Okay.
No, I think we could probably interpret it, but there are continent-wide layers of strata. Like limestone, I believe, covers most of the 48 contiguous states. One layer of limestone.
No, not one layer.
Well, there are thousands of layers, hundreds of
Different layers at different levels and different types of rock. You know, limestone, shale, Aeolian sandstone all require different environments to be made. They can't be made at the same time in the same year in a single flood. We know that. So I don't know if you really want to go into geology here because we're talking about human evolution. So do you understand that you were wrong about the Neanderthals and their eyebrow ridges growing? You've been saying that for 20 years.
No, I don't think you proved your point at all. You said that did you show a skeleton or a fossil of a human who lived to be 300 to see what happens?
No, we've never seen that.
Correct.
And but we know that their bones stop growing by the time before they're 30 years old. So have you seen, can you show a human that's 70 years old that has large eyebrow ridges that didn't have them earlier? Can you show that?
Would you think that the skeleton of Arnold Schwarzenegger or any bodybuilder, does the pulling of the muscle on the bone, the insertion point, cause the body to respond by adding more bone material? Do the bones get bigger? Not as fast, but do the bones get bigger as the muscles enlarge in a bodybuilder?
Do the brow ridges get bigger? We're talking about brow ridges here.
I asked, do the bones get bigger? Do any bones get bigger? Do any bones respond to muscular pulling?
Well, yeah, but that has nothing to do with what we were talking about. You've changed the subject again.
No, I did not. That's exactly the point. If muscles pull on a bone, the body responds by building more bone there. The fact that you show a picture of a 40 and a 60-year-old woman, the same woman, I don't know what her diet was, but I know that bones do respond to muscles pulling on them. Ask any doctor to x-ray the skeleton of, let's take Arnold Schwarzenegger as an example. I'd be willing to predict, without seeing the x-ray, that the insertion points of the muscles on Arnold Schwarzenegger, on his bones, are bigger than the average person, simply because of muscular stress on the bone. That is a response. That's a biological response the body has to build more bone density. And if a bodybuilder doesn't do that, doesn't build the muscle slowly, he may crack the bones because the skeleton cannot hold up to the muscles. That's a well-known biological fact. So yes, I think that you did not demonstrate that I was wrong, that great age, people living to be 300 years old, which is what I said, people living to be 300 years old could have larger eyebrow ridges because of the masseter muscle pulling or the frontalis muscles. The occipital
Can you demonstrate that?
Well,
Can you demonstrate that?
Okay, let's go X-ray Arnold Schwarzenegger. Sure, I could demonstrate. Let's get an
You have
X-rays
a
of the body.
300-year-old human. You have a 300-year-old human that you can show me that happens to all of them.
Well, I pointed out that bodybuilders' bones get larger. Now, Bill, you're missing a major picture here. I don't have to demonstrate because I'm not using tax dollars to teach my religion. You are using tax dollars to teach your religion to thousands of children coming through your museum. The burden of proof is on you, not me. I'm totally non-funded by taxpayer dollars, and so
I don't think we want to go into taxes.
oh,
so.
I'd be glad to if you'd like to, but you
talk about some of your presentation that you've brought up where you basically lied to people. I don't know if it's ignorance. I'm not sure if it's ignorance or lie, but we're going to find out here real quick. So
before you go into a straw man argument or attack the messenger argument, the debate today is titled "Evidence: Is there evidence for human evolution?"
That's right.
So quit bringing up stuff that you think I'm wrong on and other topics. Stick with the topic. Is there evidence for human evolution?
Do you believe that the radiometric dating methods, including carbon dating, can be used to accurately date these human evolution, the human fossils and human ancestor fossils that we find in the fossil record?
There is radiocarbon found in diamonds. Or no, there's no radiocarbon found in diamonds. The radiocarbon dating, answers go all over the scale on carbon dating. First of all, most of the fossils that you show were found way before radiocarbon was even invented.
No, most of the fossils I showed were found in the last 20, 30 years.
Now, this debate, the title is there evidence for human evolution?
Yes.
You have to demonstrate that there is. You demonstrated that a bunch of bones were found in the dirt that look different from us, that maybe look different from current apes or chimpanzees or orangutans. That's not evidence that we came from them. You failed, Bill. You didn't prove your point. You got to prove your point. Is there evidence for human evolution? No. You showed a bunch of bones in the dirt that you would like to believe is evidence. If you look at the movie The Green Mile, the poor guy, the black guy, whatever his name was found guilty of the crime because he's sitting there holding two dead girls. The evidence was misinterpreted. John Coffey. He did not kill those girls. It is
I don't know. I didn't see
common.
You assume that the evidence I presented is not evidence for human evolution. That's fine. You can make your assumption. Do you also assume that carbon dating is flawed and that the methods we use to date these fossils are flawed?
I think there are loads of evidence that carbon dating is not 100% accurate. Dates are thrown out all the time. But now you're trying to go off track. I know what you're trying to do. Okay, we'll stick with the topic. The evidence you shared for human evolution fails on its face. You showed thousands of bones found in the dirt that you are interpreting as our ancestors, but yet you did not prove they had any children. You certainly didn't prove they're ancestral to anybody, let alone you and me. You proved you found bones in the dirt. They died, Bill. They died.
Yeah.
End of story.